In today's episode of HR Visionaries, we talk to Nik. Nik will tell us a lot about how recruiting in 11 different countries work. Stay tuned. Welcome to HR Visionaries, where we unlock the secrets of modern HR. I'm Benjamin, your host. Join us as we shed light on today's HR universe with HR leaders and innovators from across the globe. Whether you're an HR pro, a business leader, or just curious about the future of work, this is your shortcut to the forefront of HR innovation. Brought to you by Hire, the AI talent attraction platform. Welcome to the latest episode of HR Visionaries. I'm looking forward to my guest today, Nik. Thanks a lot for taking the time.
Thank you for allowing me to come along today to talk to you.
Nik, can you tell us a bit about yourself? Who are you? What do you do?
Yeah, so I'm the Global Head of Recruitment for Frank Recruitment Group. So we deal with all the internal recruitment for the entire group globally across around 11 countries.
Wow! So we have a lot to talk about hiring in different countries. So what do you guys do as a company? So what's your service?
Yeah, so Frank Recruitment Group is part of 10th Revolution Group. 10th Revolution Group is a talent creation and supply company. So the Frank Recruitment Group side is the supply side of the organization, where we're a recruitment agency. But we are a specialist agency. We work in very, very niche pockets. So we look after technology supply for mainly in cloud, for Microsoft, for AWS, Salesforce, ServiceNow, etc. And we have a brand which deals specifically with that particular technology. The other side of the business is called Revelant, which is a hire, train, deploy business. So we take on board contractors. We will then train those contractors for the needs of the client, and then we will supply them to the client on a contract basis for a period of time, with the customer then having the opportunity to then take that contractor on board permanently themselves in the future. So we really like to focus within the cloud sector. We feel that is where our niche is. And so we try not to play in the other sectors, but really focus on where we're best.
Okay, I feel obliged to ask, the 10th revolution. So what were the other 9?
To be honest, I probably need to ask that question myself. I'm not sure where the name. I can tell you where the name Frank Recruitment Group came from. I'm not sure where the name 10th Revolution came from, but that's the parent company for our talent brands.
Right. So you said you had a team that recruits for 11 countries. Can you tell us a bit about, your way into becoming a leader in the HR field?
Yeah, no problem. So I'm not a traditional HR person. I didn't train as HR. I trained as a techie. And spent years in a bank in the UK looking after their credit card systems. And that was covering Africa and the Caribbean. So I started my career overseas, pretty much doing a lot of work there. And then moved into relationship management, and then moved into management consulting with IBM. And then one day, a boss of mine, a very, very good mentor of mine, Sriram, asked me to hire some people. And so I said, yeah, that sounds like fun. Sounds like a bit different to what I'm doing. And I created a graduate recruitment program, hired a load of people for the business. This was when I was based in Dubai. And that was it. I loved it. It just felt the right place for me. I was working with people on a daily basis. I was able to give people new opportunities. And so my talent acquisition career started then. I had a few years later, I had a short foray into pure HR, and I ran HR for the IBM in the Middle East for a while. But actually, my heart lied in talent acquisition. So I moved back there, and I've been there ever since. And I'm not going to tell you how many years that is.
Well, it's actually quite funny. So for my journey into HR was very much the same. So like having a business role, being asked, hey, can you help with recruiting people? And I would say always found that like the one of the most fulfilling and rewarding part of your daily business. So to get great people on board, then work with great people, develop great people, also talk very openly to people who might seek a career in banking was big for me as well. And then you have like a very good perspective on how things are developing, and it's like incredibly rewarding.
No, absolutely agree. It's kind of, I think every time in people's career they will find somewhere that fits. And for me, that was it. I just suddenly realized that this was what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I've moved up through, and now, I spend a lot of time guiding, coaching and mentoring others, to give them the best opportunity in the career space itself. And the odd part about the journey was that it's only in the last 2 years or 2.5 years that I've actually worked the recruitment agency side of recruitment. I've been in-house for pretty much all of my career up to that point, and it's very different seeing it from this side and seeing how you're no longer just helping people, but you're also helping organizations, whereas previously my job has only been focused on one organization. Now we are focusing on all of our clients.
Nik, can we talk a bit about how much the business perspective you gained in your previous roles? How much does that help as an in-house recruiter, but also as a recruiter for a recruiting agency?
So for me, it was very, very useful. Because it enables me to see, even earlier in my career in talent acquisition, it enabled me to see a different side of the business. I was able to talk to a client, I was able to talk to a candidate in the way that a candidate would talk to one of their colleagues or one of their peers. I was able to understand, especially when I was doing sort of senior and executive hiring, I was able to understand their perspective. Because having been a management consultant previously, you spend a lot of time talking to those individuals. What I see from people that come straight into the talent acquisition space or even the recruitment space, quite often they're nervous about having conversations with business or technical people because they don't really understand that side of the equation. And my only advice would be to them is, if you're not going to do it, learn it. To make sure, and we have this within Frank Recruitment Group, make sure that you're not going to be as good as the person, but you're trying to be as good as the person. Learn the technology, learn what it is that they do, and to be able to talk to them, as a colleague, on the same level. And I think when you've been through a different career path and then you come into recruitment, you've got that different perspective. If you haven't been, you need to find that perspective through learning and through just talking to people.
Right. So that's actually my next question. So I totally hear you. I think it's incredibly important, and I think one can also see very much the difference between those recruiters who are very familiar with the roles they're recruiting for, rather than just like, yeah, well, it's just banking. So in banking, all the same, or in technology, it's kind of the same. But like being very, very well connected with people on the ground who you actually hire for, that is, I think, super important. So talking to people is probably a priority. How can you get that kind of institutionalized as a team leader in the HR space for your HR or for your talent acquisition team?
Yeah, and it's very difficult. I mean, it depends. As a talent acquisition leader, it depends on what you're actually hiring for. So if you're just hiring for a specific area of the business, then get them to go and sit with the business. So if I get a new role that comes in and I haven't done that role before, I will go and I will talk to either someone who's doing the role today or the manager of someone who's doing the role today, and I'll just try and get a little bit of insight into it. I kind of describe it to my team as method acting. It's a bit like Robert De Niro. He's making his film Taxi Driver. What does he do? He goes out and he drives a taxi. Now, I'm not saying that if you're hiring a finance person, you're going to go and sit there and do the company accounts. But if you sit with someone for an hour and talk to them a little bit about what they do on a daily basis, you just become a little bit wiser and knowledgeable, so that when you're talking to the candidate, you can start to understand and you can see it from their perspective, because every role is different. Every role has different challenges, and every role has different personality needs. So you'll get that little bit more of an insight. And that's what we are as talent acquisition. We've got to be method actors. In my career, I've hired people all through the sphere. So banking is absolutely in there, management consultants, technical people. When I was in the Middle East, we were hiring plumbers, we were hiring building maintenance people, painters. We were hiring train drivers. I hired the guy that actually ran the train service for the whole of Dubai, the metro. We hired anything. In fact, one of the hardest roles I've ever hired is an air traffic controller.
Right. That the thought gives me anxiety, to be honest.
The air traffic controllers are great to hire. It's a very small network, but they really want you to know about what they do. So what did I do? I went and spent a couple of days at Sharjah Airport, and really just sat sat up there, talked to the guys, and got to understand exactly what it takes to be able to take off and land. They wouldn't let me, sadly, take off or land an aircraft, but I was
okay. That is very good to know.
Yeah, I needed a bit more training, I think, but just that piece, it just gives you that insight. And I recommend that to anybody on a new role. Just go and talk to someone who's doing the role today.
Right. It's I think always desirable to get that done. How do you think should people deal with pushbacks from the business side? Like, hey, I know that's important, but I have so much more important stuff to do. Can you help me with that?
So pushbacks in what sense? Pushbacks on candidates not being in the right fit, or
yes, sorry, I wasn't very precise. I mean, in terms of like, hey, you're asking the business side, hey, I would like to learn more, and like obviously, yeah, so people have a lot to do on the business side, and then there might be pushback, because I think for most talent acquisition people, it makes a lot of sense to do that. However, well, if you experience some pushback, you might shy away from that.
No, I hear you. And look, we've all got to understand that the business are busy. Business people are always busy, and they're always trying to do their job. But I think for me, to be successful in TA, you have to have a strong relationship with the business. If you're getting that type of pushback, then you need to work on that relationship. So you need to find a way of talking to your clients or talking to your customers, maybe at a downtime. So, take them out for coffee, or grab lunch with them. Try and build that relationship so that it becomes natural to ask that question, and then explain to them the value. Because the one thing that most people in business understand is the value of why you're going to have that interaction. And if you explain to them that I'm going to be able to get you B, maybe C class individuals, but if I understand the role and I'm able to sell the role properly, and I'm able to really talk properly to the candidate, then suddenly I should be able to bring you more A class rather than B and C class. So try and sell the value to them. And if it doesn't work, then you just need to work on your relationship.
It makes a lot of sense. I think selling value is always a great approach. Nik, can you tell us a bit about, well, you were reluctant saying how long you have been in talent acquisition, but I ask something slightly different. So not how long have you been there, but what were the big trends for you over the last few years?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, look, talent acquisition, recruitment is recruitment. The process doesn't change. At the end of the day, we go out, we create awareness of the market, we attract people either by talking to them or them applying to us. We screen them, we assess them, we decide on them, we offer them, and we hire them. That process is, and that's the same process that's been there for, for 30 odd years, and a lot longer. The technology behind that, the way that we do it has changed. I still remember really back in the day using Rolodexes.
Using what?
Using Rolodexes. So every single candidate or client name is on a piece of paper, and you flip round this Rolodex. Yeah. Having the leather bound contact books that we used to use, so we could keep a list of all of our contacts. That was the way that we used to work.
Right.
In the early days of this industry, and it was hard. We didn't have systems that kept track of everything. We didn't have search. We didn't have AI. So the first big trend is how much easier the job is today than it was, when you go back in time on that. I think candidates are becoming more selective, and they're becoming selective in very different ways. So again, if you go back 20, 30 years, candidates would look for career. They'd look for long-term career opportunities, and job for life was a phrase. When I joined the bank in the UK, it was job for life. You joined that bank and you stayed there, and then you left with a pension. And actually, some of my friends are about to, or have just gone through that period of where they're now retiring, and they've worked for the bank their entire life. That doesn't happen nowadays. That's an incredibly rare thing to happen nowadays. And candidates are selecting on a lot of very, very different factors to what they were selecting on before. So organizations and TA has to change to be able to adapt to that. People nowadays want to make sure that the culture of the organization is correct, that the values, that the morals of the organization is correct. People ask me in interview, what is your company doing from a community service perspective? How are you helping the local community, especially when you take a UK firm and you start working in other countries? In my previous role, we were working in Vietnam, we were working in Nigeria, we were working in Rwanda. And, all the time there, people are saying, so what are you doing for my country? And you'll see that a lot. So, organizations and the way that we as TA have to talk to candidates is very different. So that for me is a very, very big trend. And it comes back to understanding the candidate. It comes back to listening to the candidate, understanding what their needs are, what is it that is important to them. So technology, the changing needs, and then the big one, which was obviously what happened a few years ago. COVID changed the industry. The work from home changed everything, and suddenly you've got people working in a very, very different way. People became much more technology focused than they were before. I remember, if I go back 5 or 6 years, video interviewing was not really a big thing. It wasn't really that popular with candidates. We'd get a lot of candidates that were very uncomfortable with it. Video calling wasn't very popular at the time, and then suddenly when everybody had to suddenly go home, Skype, Teams, these things became words that everybody knew that they didn't know before. And then suddenly our lives have changed again, because now that's become almost the de facto norm for, screening candidates. You call them in the office, but you call them in for one interview. You don't have them coming in 3 or 4 times as we used to do, sort of in 2010, for instance.
It's crazy, right? So like also when you had to go to different country for a job interview, you basically you fly to London several times for job interviews, right? So it's pretty it feels like 30 years ago, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I still remember one of the best stories was a guy we flew from Hawaii to Dubai for an interview. It was a 3-hour interview, and he basically said that he completely circumnavigated the globe for one interview. It was absolutely incredible. And yes, that's what we used to do. And obviously we'd spoken to him on video a couple of times first. And to be honest, with senior people, we still would do that. We still want to meet people face to face. You still want them to see your office. You still want them to see the environment. You still want them to see the culture that exists within the space that you're working. But it's not, it's now become much more accepted that we will talk on Skype or we'll talk on Teams, that you'll record a video, an introduction video, and also that companies will send out videos. That's another strange thing that I'm seeing a lot more of nowadays. And actually, I think in some ways it's gone a bit too far. Taking a different industry, I was trying to buy a car at the weekend, and the car salesman, didn't ring me up, no phone call. They sent me a video that they'd recorded in the office. They sent me on email a video they'd recorded in the office to talk to me. And I just thought, where's the human interaction with that? That's where it's gone too far now. And, so there's no way I can ask questions. There's no way I can get my input. So that's a danger. And I think almost a trend that I am seeing in recruitment is we're going a little bit too far on we've got to use technology to help us. And we need to step back to, and I make my joke about, the bad old days of telephones and Rolodexes, but you've got to get back to what is the core of the job. And so, AI helps us a great deal in many things. The systems help us a great deal in many things, but don't lose the human element of talent acquisition. Don't lose the human element of human resources. We are people, and we've got to work and interact, and we've got to have relationships with people.
I 100% agree. I think what's a great opportunity with AI is, for me at least, enabling kind of a refocusing in terms of human interaction is incredibly important. And many of the conversations you're having nowadays circle around standard stuff that is not necessarily human interaction is not necessarily needed. However, there are then those critical discussions or situations where you definitely need a human on the other side, and that also requires lots of preparation and do the preparation and the conversation for those critical situations much better, and get rid of all the stuff you waste time on nowadays with providing basic information or anything.
Yeah, no, absolutely agree.
So the sustainability angle I want to focus on a bit. So you mentioned, okay, so hiring for hiring people in different countries requires you to focus on, hey, what are you guys doing for my community? I think it has also a lot to do with sustainability in general, to not fly everyone around the globe for one single interview, being mindful of learning about cultures and communicating very, very openly to people that previously could only or was only done by a phone or in person.
Yeah, and look, sustainability is a key thing for Frank Recruitment Group, and I think it's really, really important. I run a team which is global. I try to minimize the amount of time that I travel. I do travel to spend time with my team, but I try to minimize that. I think it's really important that we are conscious of carbon footprints that we're doing. Frank Recruitment Group is a member of the EcoVadis service, and I think we're a silver member, which is excellent because it does show that we are really trying, and we are trying to improve within sustainability.
The 11 countries you mentioned, what countries are they? Are those? Sorry, what countries are those? And what do you do there?
So it's the same, sir. We offer, it's some of our brands are in all the countries, and all of our brands are in some of the countries. It depends on what the service need is for the countries, but I mean we go from North America, so US, Canada. Then if we look in Europe, we've got France, Germany, Italy, Spain. We also cover things like the Nordics and CEE, but we cover that from one of our other offices. We're in Switzerland, and then we go all the way across to Melbourne in Australia, and Tokyo and Singapore. So we cover we effectively cover the world from those offices.
Right, and it basically means you're operating every time though.
Yeah, it's a 24-hour business.
What kind of challenges does that pose for leading a team that is in Australia, Asia, Europe, America? So is it actually possible to have a call with everyone on board, which probably in the early morning your time, right? So that's a time when people in Australia and people in the US could be, oh, sorry, in your early morning. So that's probably the only time that one can do.
There is no time when all three, if you think about a triangle of East Coast, America, you've got Australia, and then you've got Europe. There is no time when those three are at anywhere near reasonable working hours. So the only way you can do it is basically it costs me a fortune in coffee that I have to buy my poor team down in Australia, because they are normally the ones there. It's a small team down there, so they're the ones that would have to go onto the call at challenging hours if we have a single call with everybody on board. But what I do try to do is I try to have, for instance, an early morning US call. We would then enable that to fit with Australia in evening time. That means, yes, I've got to put myself out, but that's part of my job. There's no real time that Europe and Australia works together.
Yeah.
So I have a weekly call with my team down in Australia, and yes, that is a ridiculous time either in the morning or in the evening, depending on where the clocks are. But that's, as I say, that's just part of the job. So we do have to ask team members to accommodate sometimes. Trying to even get the US and Europe on a call can be challenging if you've got East Coast and you've got the US. There's not many hours where they cross over. But then, we make sure that we can record calls, we can record messages. We have interaction. We look at other ways of interacting as a team. We use Microsoft Teams a lot to communicate with each other and to share information and that sort of thing. Yeah, it's frustrating. I mean, I wish we all worked on the same time zone, but that's not the way that life sadly works. And I've kind of got used to this over all my years. Most of my time has been spent working in multiple countries, so you just get used to the time zones. My first job covering Africa and the Caribbean meant I was on call, pretty much 18 hours a day. And so when you do that straight out of university, it just becomes natural then as you as you progress.
It did. Nik, can you tell us a bit about the future trends that are most important for you guys that you currently see appearing, that may be relevant for your business?
Yeah, so for me, the biggest thing that needs to happen within talent acquisition is the efficiency piece, because as organizations grow, as organizations change, we now know that they're not going to throw more people at it. Back in the day, it was simple. If you needed to hire 100 people, you had 2 recruiters. If you needed to hire 400 people, you had 8 recruiters. It's as simple as that, and it just becomes it's a very linear number. Nowadays, we don't get that linear number. The cost efficiencies that companies are trying to bring into play across the world in regards to minimizing the back office services, central services, whatever you want to call it. So we need to find ways of doing more, but doing it with the same or doing less. So the technology, and despite what I said earlier about don't use technology for technology's sake, technology is going to be the absolute key for me, and AI is going to be a very, very important part of that. But again, I also caution on the dangers of that. So for me, I think the next sort of 5 years in recruitment is going to be about finding that balance. What is the balance between using technology to to reduce the amount of work, effort, admin that the recruiter needs to do to give them more time to spend on their relationships and their interactions. That part is something that you don't want to minimize. You know, the more you take away the interactions, the less of a service that you're going to be giving and the more risk you introduce. So I can see over the next few years, technology has jumped substantially over the last few years. COVID has been something that has driven us in that direction. But now it's about finding that right balance. And that for me is one of the biggest trends. Do I see AI taking over and becoming the recruiter of the future? No, I honestly don't. And I can see a lot of industries will go that way, but then I'm thinking back to the outsourcing of call centers, you know, 10, 15 years ago in the UK. Most of those have come back onshore again because it didn't work. And I can see that bounce happening as well with, you know, we're going to go for these full digital assistants. We're going to go for the car garage sending out a video instead of actually talking to you. We're going to go down that road for a while. Customers are going to get frustrated, disenfranchised with the service, and then it will come back in. So for me, trying to stay on the middle of that road, not swaying too far into the overuse, but also actually, you know, taking on that adoption is probably for me the biggest thing that we need to do in the next few years.
Yeah. Well, I 100% agree. I think in particular now that it's so much about knowledge, and it's so much about also, well, not just knowledge, but also the personal fit. So this human interaction is like incredibly important. And when you think about the attitude as one of the most important things one need to check for. I don't know how an AI could potentially do that in a way that suits every team a person should work for.
Agreed.
Nik, thank you so much for your time. It was great talking to you. Really enjoyed our conversation. And yeah, thanks a lot for taking the time.
No problems. It was great. Thank you.
Awesome. And thanks all of you guys for listening in, and see you next time.